It's a very good morning this side of the country. Live, we are in Uganda, Kampala, East Africa, but it's an afternoon somewhere. It's an evening somewhere. So a very good morning, a very good evening, a very good afternoon, all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to yet a special edition of Acfim Talks. Your host today is Felix Kafuma, and we are going to be discussing a very interesting topic that looks at the recommendations that were made by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, commonly known as OECD, on enabling the environment for civil society. And I'll be introducing my panelists in a short while. But before we get started, let me invite everyone out there to grab a cup of coffee and be part of this conversation. We are live on Facebook, live on Twitter, Acfim UG, and also live on YouTube. You can be able to catch and follow the conversations that are going to be happening in a short while. I also want to take the same opportunity to welcome everybody who has been following Acfim Talks. We are now going to be holding monthly talk shows as opposed to the weekly ones, but we shall be having that conversations same time, same place, but on a monthly basis. Before we start, allow me to provide a bit of a context, then I can go and introduce our panelists on why are we discussing a very important topic today that looks at the recommendations on enabling the environment for civil society and that were made by OECD, commonly known as the Organization for Economic Cooperation Development, after having established a work stream on civil society, and that was in 2017. This work stream was intended to provide guidance on development assistance committee members, DAC, on the way they support and engage with civil society. The thinking of the DAC members at that point in time was that no one should be left behind, and the first should be put. That no one should be left behind, and the first should be put last. As a result, the recommendations were drafted and were passed, recognizing that civil society plays a central role in achieving and realizing the OECD DAC role. Now, many countries, Uganda inclusive, in the last decade, we've been experiencing the closing civic space. Of course, this coincides with the growing authoritarianism as a preferred means of governance, and governments have been seen shifting and labeling vocal organizations, especially to be anti-government, and some looking at them or referring to them as agents of foreign influence. And we've seen also donors, especially withdrawing their support because they have been labeled to be propagating foreign agenda. And because of that, we've further seen the civic space shrinking. And without funding of OECD DAC members, you know very well that civil society can't play its role of mobilizing the citizenry to participate in the development agenda. On one of the pledges that OECD made, the OECD DAC donors made, as they were trying to protect and promote civic space by focusing on how they could enable the environment for civil society to function, was to improve on the way they fund civil society actors. And one of the ways they recommended was to ensure that they provide flexible funding mechanism. So in today's episode of Acfim Talks, we would want to expound and also discuss these OECD DAC recommendations on enabling the environment for civil society, and we track to establish how, to what extent they have been fulfilled, and where we are, and what should be done. And allow me to introduce my panelists, because this conversation, I think we need to bring on board actors, individuals who have been following and tracking these developments to help us make a case and understand where we are and where we stand. And allow me to introduce to you two gentlemen. One is Abel Eseru, who is a lecturer, integrity and civic space scholar, participated in one of the research studies that looked at the state of civic space in Uganda. Abel, I hope you're on set. If you're on set, Abel, you are most welcome to Acfim Talks.
Thanks.
It's great to have you on Acfim Talks, and good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to other people who are following us.
All right. I will also be joined by Henry Muguzi, who is a Pan-African civil society leader and a pro-democracy activist, who also weighed in and was part of the team that produced a report that looked at the state of civic space in Uganda. I hope Henry is on set as well.
Yeah, yes, my brother Felix, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are joining us from. It's an honor to be here. It's been such a while, but it's an honor to be discussing such an interesting topic, interesting for Africa.
Great. Indeed, at a point in time when there is a lot of concern, especially when it comes to the closing civic space across Africa. But let's pick it from there. First of all, let me begin with you, Abel. What is OECD DAC? What is that animal and what does it do? What is its work? Can you break down that structure called OECD DAC, and why would I even be concerned if I'm a civics space actor or activist?
Okay, let me start first of all with OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which was created way back in 1961 as a unique forum where government, parliament, and civil society work together to address the social, economic, and environmental challenges to globalization. The OECD has about over 68 members who are part of it, who always come together, compare policy experiences, seek answers to common problems, identify good practices, and work to coordinate domestic and international policies. So you find that this is OECD is more of that heart of international cooperation, where better policies are created for better lives. But when you come to the Development Assistance Committee, which we know as DAC, it's more of also a forum which brings together the largest providers of aid. This includes over 30 member countries who provide aid to facilitate and ensure that the social, economic, and environmental challenges are tackled by all actors who are trying to make sure that the world is a better place where people can live and thrive and be able to live a life which is more meaningful than a life that is so which is not good for anyone. So when you talk about the OECD DAC recommendation on enabling environment for civil society, which was adopted way back in 2021 by the DAC committee members, they realized that there was an issue, especially with civil society. Civil society, they looked at civil society as one of the key actors that is supposed to work together with them to ensure that they are able to contribute towards the Agenda 2030 and also the pledge of leaving no one behind, protecting and defending democracy, and also ensuring that there is inclusive and sustainable development. So these members realize that they need civil society to be part of their agenda and ensure that they are able to contribute towards some of the things I've mentioned. So they developed a recommendation on enabling civil society and other and humanitarian assistance, which focused on 3 pillars. The first pillar, which they looked at, was respecting, protecting, and promoting civic space. The second pillar was on enabling and supporting civil society. And then the third pillar looked at how they can be able to incentivize civil society and also ensure that civil society itself is inclusive, transparent, and accountable to some of the things they do.
Okay, thank you so much, Abel, for laying the case. Let me come to Henry. Henry, you are a civil society leader, and we are here discussing civic space. Why are OECD DAC members really concerned about the operating civic space and the environment for civil society? And what is it that they're trying to address in this case?
Thank you, Felix. I think I will pick it up from where Abel left it, because this organization we're talking about, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, is something that not many of our audience in Africa have interacted with, even when it's been around for 60 years. And I was looking at the countries that are listed as members of OECD. I think I saw 38. The most recent country to become a member is Costa Rica. So Costa Rica is number 38th. So I should tell you that there's not one African country that is a member of OECD. Russia is not there, and China is not there. So you'll find there European countries. Surprisingly, Turkey is one of them, but the other usual suspects, of course, United States, Canada are there, Australia are there, and you'll find a number of them from Latin America, including Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, of course. And you'll find there some few Asians, such as Japan, Korea, I think South Korea, no? So that's what we have in OECD. But I have also seen, there's a platform called the OECD Development Center. So OECD Development Center is where countries from Africa participate. And basically, it's a platform for dialogue with the developing and emerging economies. But let me go to your question. You asked the question, why is OECD concerned about civic space now? I think it is clear that across the world, democracy is on defense, and that there is a growing descent, an increasing descent towards autocracy and authoritarianism. Now, these members, OECD members, realize and recognize that democracy cannot thrive where there is autocracy. And whenever autocracy has come face to face with the democracy, autocracy seems to be winning the war, especially in Africa and many other developing economies. Now, so this is a situation they cannot accept, because you see, if democracy cannot thrive where it is threatened. And so you cannot talk about democracy if the key elements, such as the key fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of space, such as freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, the respect for the rule of law. These have to be there. And when you look around, these are the building blocks, the fundamental tenets of civic space. And therefore, from 2000, I think early 2000, from 2019, from the year 2000, they've been from 2000, I think, and 1819, they've been concerned with helping out using their clout, but also their experiences on countries that seem to be falling victims of autocracy. And so they understand and made a resolution to respect, to develop and promote civic space, so that citizens can enjoy these countries and be able to express themselves, supporting engaging civil society, but also incentivizing civil society. One of the things they committed to is to provide flexible funding, because when you provide flexible funding, it means that all forms of civil society, including that type of organizing that is informal, can be able to access resources. And without resources, there are things you cannot do. You get to be constrained. But when you support efforts to build civic space, when you support civil society in all its form and shape, regardless of whether some of it is informal, by providing funding, then you are able to help democracy grow. You are able to help democracy, overcome autocracy, and you are able to make citizens believe that they can do something and participate, and you are able to empower those citizens. So this is why they are concerned. And of course, as you know, the international agenda of the sustainable development goals is its success is incumbent upon a number of things, including citizen participation. And I liked what you were introducing when they made a commitment that the last should be put first. Often in their listing of stakeholders, the stakeholder they put last has been civil society. And they are committing here that now the time has come to put civil society first. But they're also saying that we should not leave anybody behind, because just as they say, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, it is now becoming increasingly clear that poverty anywhere is poverty everywhere, and that the world, as we understood with how COVID shook us, you see, a threat can emerge from any state, including those ones having ignored for the longest time, because they're underdeveloped. And so now you see that the mood and the mantra is on ensuring that they rally the citizens from those countries where they've been left behind. Now, the challenge is, why are all these things not known to all of us, especially for some of us that live in Africa, where democracy is on defense, where democracy is in reverse, and where there is a growing descent towards authoritarianism. So the thing is, those are questions I think we need to grapple with, to contend with. But I think the initial idea of ensuring that the last is put first, and that nobody is left behind in this agenda, if the Sustainable Development Goals are going to record anything you can call achievement. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Indeed, you cannot talk about achieving this SDGs and you do not recognize the role civil society plays, but also within the context of what we call now shrinking civic space. I was reading somewhere as if there were some efforts. I hope it is true what I came across. I think South Africa was one of those countries, could be the first country that might join the 38, probably the only country from Africa so far that seems to have expressed interest. Let's see how that goes. But let me come to you, Abel, on the issue to do, and picking it up from where Henry has left it, because one of the recommendations that he has hinted on, I also talked about it, was the flexible funding that they pledged to extend to civil society actors. But beyond that, I'm so sure that there were other recommendations that were made by the OECD DAC members in regard to promoting civic space and enabling the environment for civil society. Can you share with the public what are some of those recommendations that were made? You are muted. Okay.
First of all, I want to supplement from what Henry has just said. We know that some of these OECD member countries have now understood that there is work to be done in terms of strengthening civil society so that they can be able to support and engage some of the recommendations, the decisions and documents these OECD DAC members come up with, so that they can be able to implement them effectively. So that's why they say they first looked around and said, what are some of the key things which we need to tackle before we can even improve on how we support some of these actors? What are the challenges and what can we do? So that's why they looked at around and they saw one of the issues shrinking civic space, and also their support to civil society was not so much good. So they developed some of these recommendations and they wanted to see how they can be able to improve. If we look at pillar number 2, which is on supporting and engaging with civil society, one of the things they recommended is that they want to establish, in consultation with civil society, policies and strategies for working with civil societies in both partner and territories of those countries where they implement some of the decisions they have made. But if you look at how civil society, for example, in Uganda is, and how some of these development partners or who sit at the DAC committees where they make some of these decisions, you ask yourself, do they always come down? Do they have like a forum where they all engage with civil society actors to sometimes share what are some of the challenges these civil society actors are facing, and what are some of the policies that they are needed to be brought on board so that they can be able maybe to share in their bigger forums? So we currently don't have, I've not seen so far personally, I've not seen any forum which brings both the local civil society actors in Uganda and some of these OECD DAC members where they can sit and share notes and ensure that they have sittings and they always engage. So establishing in consultation with civil society some of the things to me would be of good concern, and to help improve on how some of these OECD DAC members support and engage with civil society. Another one was to the second one I saw, which I think is
Abel, you're muted.
I'm saying the second one, which I saw, which was so critical and important, is on they pledge to promote and invest in the leadership of local civil society actors in the partner countries where they operate. In this, they are looking at strengthening in terms of training the leaders, the capacity of these leaders, and also on top of that, they intend on increasing the availability of access of direct, flexible, and predictable support in core program based support. So you look at some of currently what I've seen in Uganda with how civil society and some of these developed corporations are working. Most of the funding we have seen is not flexible. The funding they give to some of these civil society actors is fixed in some of the things, so you cannot be able to use the funding for other things, whereby because the context keeps changing, and you cannot use funds as you predicted. Maybe initially you looked at the context 2 years back, but for a country like Uganda where context keeps changing almost every month, you need to have flexible funding to be able to confront some of the challenges we face. Because if OECD is a forum where policies are made to in order to confront the socio-economic and environmental challenges, you also need to be aware to the fact that countries differ, and the context in which some of the civil society actors work also differ. Because of the rising authoritarianism, some countries don't even allow civil society actors to organize, to meet. So they need to be alive to that. So for me, the thing of promoting and investing in the leadership of local civil society actors in terms of training and also providing flexible funding is a good area. And also they looked at streamline administrative requirements for civil society support to lower transaction costs for civil society. Let's talk about Uganda again. If you want to apply for funding from some of these development partners, there are a lot of requirements they will require you to submit. Yet, in some cases, the government can map out some of the civil society actors which are so poor, and they deny them maybe MOUs and also permits, operational permits. So when a development partner is not awake to some of those challenges, you will say that I cannot give you my funding because you are not legally registered in your country. But you have not taken into consideration under what circumstances have they denied such an organization, maybe an MOU in the districts where the country, the organization is working, or also why has government not renewed the permit of that such an organization. So if we take into consideration some of those things, we are able to understand that, okay, civil society is working in a context which is not friendly. So we need to take into consideration some of the things which are in place and appreciate that how they work should not, how they are working, if you say that they should give you all the requirements as per within the law in the country, sometimes the government uses the law to constrain some of the works of the civil societies. So the OECD DAC members, with some of these recommendations, I think they are now coming to reality with what is happening in some of the countries.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abel. Interesting. And we shall be going for a break. But before we go for a break, I think let me first bring in here Henry, picking it up from where Abel has left it, sharing some of the recommendations coming through, but also looking at where we are in terms of are we scoring? Are we not scoring? Probably weigh in on that one, but also another question to you. Are these recommendations binding on the interventions or behavior of DAC members when they work with the developing countries in the global south? And also in situations where the DAC members are not fulfilling part of their bargain on their side, how do we hold them accountable to fulfilling these recommendations? Anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much, Felix. You know, this discussion, it's important that many of us in the South understand this, no? Because it's something we never get to know, even pay attention to. Now, I have understood from what our documents have reviewed that at the high level, during those high level meetings, when the DAC members and the development aid committee members, which is DAC, meet, they have invited civil society and they have had kind of discussions. But for us in Africa, it's unclear how somebody gets to, a civil society actor gets to be in those spaces. Because at the country level, we don't seem to see the DAC members kind of facilitating such a discussion with the civil society on what is it that they should carry forward in the high-level forum. And therefore, that's an area also to talk about. But also, they restate what they have always been, they have always stated, that civil society plays a very significant role in terms of amplifying the voices of the voiceless. In many African countries, partly because of the low levels of civic competence, we don't have what you can call citizenship. You have a group of individuals, men and women, occupying territories, but their behavior is very different from the behavior of citizens of a particular country. And therefore, a number of things that concern their countries are things that are almost of no concern. You look at their behavior, they don't behave like citizens. The closest it gets to being a citizen is civil society. And of course, civil society then starts to organize in form of organizations as we are. And these development partners, members of OECD, have committed to support these organizations by providing flexible support. And that support may not necessarily be funding, but they need to do many other things. But you see, sometimes you may not know exactly what support we need as civil society actors in countries if you do not speak with us. If you don't come to us and start a discussion so that we can tell you what we need, you cannot stand on top of the tree and use observation to determine what we need, because sometimes it is not what it looks like. And this has not happened. And therefore, these are some of the things that need to be addressed. And I hope this discussion we are having and many others we are going to have are able to awaken and inform the fellow citizens, civil society actors across the continent, maybe across the global south, to understand that the time has come to have discussions with these members of OECD and the Development Aid Committee, DAC. But then you also asked a question, what has to be done? I think it's important to hold a discussion, a frank discussion about how they can help. Because for countries, there are countries in Africa where every time they have overcome a challenge, they have needed external intervention. And therefore, if that has been the case in the past, it might be the case now as well. And therefore, it is important that for that intervention or help or support to be appropriate, they speak to us to tell them what exactly we want to have. But also, when we, as civil society organizations on the continent, especially in countries that are descending fast towards the authoritarianism, when we get to be labeled as anti-government, as you know, then there is no justification for why a development partner or a member of OECD or DAC should read into that labeling and steer clear and fear to engage with that entity that they have labeled as anti-government. And therefore, I think it's important that these things are discussed frankly in order to have a to have a good outcome. Now, civil society and enabling environment. It's important that even us who are the beneficiaries are able to understand what we need and what we desire and what we think will help us. And so it boils down to a frank discussion, which should happen in all African countries. And I hope colleagues out there that are listening to us can pick interest into these things and have a frank discussion with these development partners who are members of development accounts, the Development Aid Committee, but also the OECD, to make sure that our voices, the voices that get to be represented at the high-level meeting, resonate with what we exactly want to see at a grassroots level. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much. Indeed, we must have a frank discussion and a conversation, and this is just one of the many that we are planning for to carry the conversation around the DAC recommendations on enabling civil society environment. But let's go for a break, and when we come back, we shall continue with this conversation shortly after the break.